reading from the book of Numbers. The Lord said to Moses in the desert of Paran, "Send men to reconnoiter the land of Canaan, which I am giving the children of Israel. You shall send one man from each ancestral tribe, all of them princes." After reconnoitering the land for 40 days, they returned, met Moses and Aaron and the whole congregation of the children of Israel. In the desert of Paran at Kadesh, made a report to them all, and showed the fruit of the country to the whole congregation. They told Moses, "We went into the land to which you sent us. It does indeed flow with milk and honey, and here is its fruit. However, the people who are living in the land are fierce, and the towns are fortified and very strong. Besides, we saw descendants of the Anakim there. Amalekites live in the region of Negeb. Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites dwell in the highlands, and Canaanites along the seacoast and the banks of the Jordan." Caleb, however, to quiet the people toward Moses, said, "We ought to go up and seize the land, for we can certainly do so." But the men who had gone up with him said, "We cannot attack these people. They are too strong for us." So they spread discouraging reports among the children of Israel about the land they had scouted, saying, "The land that we explored is a country that consumes its inhabitants, and all the people we saw there are huge, veritable giants. The Anakim were a race of giants. We felt like mere grasshoppers, and so we must have seen to them." At this, the whole community broke out with loud cries, and even in the night the people wailed. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "How long will this wicked assembly grumble against me? I have heard the grumblings of the children of Israel against me. Tell them, 'By my life, says the Lord, I will do to you just what I have heard you say. Here in the desert shall your dead bodies fall. 40 days you spent in scouting the land. 40 years shall you suffer for your crimes, 1 year for each day. Thus you will realize what it means to oppose me. I, the Lord, have sworn to do this, to all this wicked assembly that conspired against me. Here in the desert they shall die to the last man." Verbum Domini. Remember us, O Lord, as you favor your people.
Remember us, O Lord, as you favor your people.
We have sinned, we and our fathers. We have committed crimes, we have done wrong. Our fathers in Egypt considered not your wonders.
Remember us, O Lord, as you favor your people.
But soon they forgot his works. They waited not for his counsel. They gave way to craving in the desert and tempted God in the wilderness.
Remember us, O Lord, as you favor your people.
They forgot the God who had saved them, who had done great deeds in Egypt, wondrous deeds in the land of Ham, terrible things at the Red Sea.
Remember us, O Lord, as you favor your people.
Then he spoke of exterminating them, but Moses, his chosen one, withstood him in the breach, to turn back his destructive wrath.
Remember us, O Lord, as you favor your people.
Alleluia. Deus vobiscum.
Et cum spiritu tuo.
Lectio Sancti Evangelii secundum Matteum.
Gloria tibi, Domine.
At that time, Jesus withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. And behold, a Canaanite woman of that district came and called out, "Have pity on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." But he did not say a word in answer to her. His disciples came and asked him, "Send her away, for she keeps calling out after us." He said in reply, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But the woman came and did him homage, saying, "Lord, help me." He said in reply, "It is not right to take the food of the children and throw it to the dogs." She said, "Please, Lord, for even the dogs eat the scraps that fall from the table of their masters." Then Jesus said to her in reply, "O woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." And her daughter was healed from that hour.
Verbum Domini.
Laus tibi, Christe.
Today, throughout the Universal Church, we celebrate the memorial of St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, also known as Edith Stein, St. Edith Stein, in her name, before her entrance into the Carmelite order. And really within the spirit of her life and her quest for truth, I always like to, around this time, at the insistence of one of my professors in seminary, Father Frederick Miller, who taught pretty much all of our friars, he would always tell us around this time in August just to cast the nets out right before parishes are starting RCIA programs throughout the world, especially I think through our global Catholic television, radio, internet ministry, really to cast the nets out and just to invite those viewers, those who maybe have been listening for years, decades even, listening even through radio and internet, to invite you to consider going through RCIA. Maybe you're not Catholic, and maybe you've been being tugged throughout these years and felt that the Lord was inviting you. And this is how St. Teresa Benedicta, in her own life, she was a Jewish woman of a devout family. And when she was 14 years old, she consciously chose to pretty much reject her faith. But she was still a searcher for the truth. And there are so many people out there searching for truth that stumble across this Catholic television network. And trust me, I've heard from you. So I continue to, I think this is the 4th time I've done it in my priesthood. And I have gotten letters saying, "Father, thank you for pushing me off the fence." So if anybody is out there that needs a little bit of a prod, a little bit of a push, this is me maybe giving you a little bit of a jolt this morning. Maybe you don't need a prod, but maybe you need to be totally immersed in God's mercy. Just an invitation, simply. The church proposes, the church doesn't impose. And this is me proposing to you the truth of the gospel, the truth of the Catholic faith. St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, again, she was the youngest of 11 children in a Jewish family, and her family was a very religious family. And she herself gave up faith in God, and these are her own words. I consciously decided of my own volition to give up praying. I consciously decided to give up praying. And I think some of you have had that conscious choice in your life too, where you stop praying in your life and you notice something happening in your life. She was a student of philosophy, and philosophy is a quest for truth. It's man's quest for truth, man's quest for meaning, man's quest for purpose in life. It's asking the very relevant questions that all of us ask in life. What is the meaning of life? Why am I here? How do I come to know these things? These are questions that all of us ask, or really should ask throughout our lives. She was a pupil and teaching assistant of a well-known philosopher, Edmund Husserl, a phenomenologist, who would later tutor her for her doctorate in philosophy, which she graduated with summa cum laude. And she wrote her thesis on the problem of empathy. And in God's plan, this was probably the Lord preparing her heart to receive the truth. Because what is empathy? Empathy is somebody that really feels somebody else's pain. Somebody that can walk through with somebody. And it's a lot different than sympathy. Empathy is somebody who walks next to somebody, knows somebody, and really chooses to enter into their pain, enter into their suffering. So she did her doctorate studies on this particular problem. If you say in philosophy, you would say the problem of empathy or the problem of pain. During this period of her life, she went into a Catholic cathedral in Frankfurt, Germany, and she saw a woman going to kneel in this church for brief prayer. And this is what she said. This was something totally new to me. In the synagogues and Protestant churches I had visited, I simply went to services. Here, and she says here in this Frankfurt Cathedral, however, I saw someone coming straight from a busy marketplace into this empty church, as if she was going to have an intimate conversation. It was something that I never forgot. Something very interesting. And it points to the reality of what so many people have come to experience when they walk in a Catholic church and experiencing the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. Something that I experienced as a young man in my early 20s, just experiencing a presence, something that I couldn't put into words. Someone is there with me. And at the end of her dissertation, she wrote, "There have been people who believed that a sudden change had occurred within them, and that this was a result of God's grace." So in phenomenology is a study of human experience. Study how someone comes to know the truth based on their own experience. So in her study and in her dialogue with people, she came to realize and to see other people's walk of faith. She came to see how other people in their own experience came to know who God was. And that we can really call that where our subjective faith comes into contact with objective truth. That there exists objective truth outside of myself, and this is a problem that our culture constantly battles with and won't recognize, that truth exists outside of yourself. Outside of you. You are not dependent upon the truth. Whether you believe it or not, truth is truth. And in the study, really in philosophy, that's where philosophy comes into contact with truth, with the cross, with Jesus so often, with the truth of the gospel, is that in our quest for truth as subjects, we come into contact with something, truth, objective, that is outside of ourselves. And this is exactly what St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross came into contact with. She came into contact with a truth that was undeniable. But at the same time, she experienced it as a person. She came to experience she came to know objective truth, something outside of herself. She became good friends with Husserl's assistant, Adolf Reinach, and his wife. And Adolf died in 1917, and then Edith went to visit his widowed wife. And this is her recount of meeting this woman with such faith. And this is, again, before her conversion, but before becoming a Christian. This is Edith's words. "This was my first encounter with the cross and the divine power it imparts to those who bear it. It was the moment when my unbelief collapsed and Christ began to shine his light on me. Christ in the mystery of the cross. When my unbelief began to collapse." How many of us have had that experience in our lives? When we meet Christ, when we meet truth, our unbelief begins to give way, begins to collapse, and the light begins to shine forth. Sometimes ever so dimly. All the Lord needs sometimes is a little crack and begins to open up our eyes. And later she went on to write, "These things were in God's plan, which I had not planned at all. I am coming to the living faith and conviction that from God's point of view, there is no chance, and that the whole of my life, down to every detail, has been mapped out in God's divine providence and makes complete and perfect sense in God's seeing eyes." And again, in our everyday experience, sometimes we think that what we want to do is what is the perfect plan. God's plan is the perfect plan. Once we look back at our lives, we see how God has led us. And in 1918, she gave up her job as Husserl's teaching assistant, and she didn't see him again until 1930. And she shared with him about her own personal faith. This is before her baptism again. She was coming to faith. She wrote these amazing and prophetic words. She writes, "Every time I feel my powerlessness and inability to influence people directly, I become more keenly aware of the necessity of my own Holocaust." End quote. These are her words. My own Holocaust, my own offering, my own dying to self. Prophetic, isn't it? In the summer of 1921, she picked up the autobiography of St. Teresa of Avila, and she read and finished the book in one night. And again, these are her words. "When I had finished the book, I said to myself, 'This is truth.'" First of all, she finished the book in one night. I couldn't do that. I think any of us could do that. Push through that hard read in one night. "This is truth," she said. And she was baptized on January 1st, 1922, on the feast of the circumcision of Jesus, when Jesus entered into the font. This is when she said that I had given up practicing my religion at 14 and did not begin to feel my Jewish faith again until I had returned to God. Excuse me, I want to correct that. Jesus did not enter into the font. She entered into the font. My writing is too small this morning, lest I get tons of letters. And then later she enters the convent, and she writes to a friend, "One can only gain a scientia crucis," that is, a knowledge of the cross, if one has thoroughly experienced the cross. And isn't this true? A scientia crucis, a knowledge of the cross. One can only come to this through being convinced of the cross. And she said, "I have been convinced of this from the first moment onwards, and have said with all my heart, Ave crux spes unica. I welcome you, and have said with all my heart, our cross, our only hope." And she was arrested on August 2nd, 1942, and on August 7th, 987 Jews were deported to Auschwitz. And most likely on this day, August 9th, it was her sister Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, her sister, along with many other Jewish people, that were led to death in Auschwitz and gassed in the concentration camps. Again, she really prophesied her own death. She said that she would have to experience her own Holocaust, her own offering. And in many ways, she reminds me of the woman in the gospel reaching out to Jesus with such faith, with such expectant faith. This woman in the gospel reached out to Jesus with such faith that Jesus would heal her little girl. She was a searcher for the truth. And just like St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, Edith Stein, each one of us are called to search for the truth. And it's a constant search for the truth. It's not as if we find the truth and then the search is over. We spend the rest of our life being students of the truth, students of Jesus, studying Jesus, sitting at Jesus' feet, learning from Jesus. We never come to an experience where we have it all figured out. We come before Jesus today begging him to reveal himself more clearly to us so that we may have that vision of truth that St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross experienced in her own life.